everybody, this is Andy from Tennis Euphoria, and today I'm bringing you my review of the Dunlop FX 500. So from the outside looking in, it looks like Dunlop are going for it at the moment with regards to bringing new lines to market. I'm really excited to look at the new CX line when it comes out. And I note with interest that there does seem to be some sort of interesting strategic partnerships with other technology providers. So more credible options for the consumer can only be a good thing. And I thought they had done a pretty good job with the SX, as in one of my previous reviews. So the market seems to distinguish racket lines with colours. So you kind of know that when you have a racket with a blue theme in it, then that is going to be a power orientated racket. There's some pretty stiff competition in this space. Evenhead had an open kind of power racket in the Instinct. Wilson have their Ultra line. Yonex have the E-Zone, and I think across all the ranges they're probably doing what they say in that line in terms of blending power with some control. And then of course you have probably the market leader in this space, the Babolat Pure Drive, the racket that everybody's looking to get one up over and take some market share from. And across these ranges, broadly speaking, you're going to find some pretty common themes with regards to specs. 100 square inches, they're going to be stiff, they're likely to have a 16x19 open string pattern, and that's the case with the Dunlop. So let's have a look at the specs. I elected to review the 300 gram option, even though the Tour was an interesting option, because I think that's the one that most people will gravitate towards, and that's the one that people will think about when they think about this type of racket. Mine was a touch over spec, coming in 2 grams heavier at 302 unstrung, but everything else obviously was the same. Balance point, interestingly, was 320. On the face of it, there's quite a lot of technology here. So, quoting I guess from website, the Power Grid string tech creates a 30% larger sweet spot. Sonic Core is a super elastic material that dampens impact shock and reduces frame vibrations, claimed up to 37%. Flex Touch Resin is a newer material developed by Cura Plastics, and that's a compound with high elasticity and vibration dampening properties. And then there is Power Boost Frame Geometry. But of course the question is, does all of this tech work and make any difference? And I always think with these rackets that the key is to kind of work with that high stiffness level of 71, and can some of that dampening and vibration reducing technology have an impact on how the racket plays? On court, I was actually really taken by this racket hitting, particularly from the baseline. I was mindful that I was coming off the back of playing a lot with the Prince 93P, so it did make things kind of feel easier when it comes to power and easy depth. But after that honeymoon period dissipated, I actually did appreciate that this racket, I think, does make playing the game relatively easy next to others. It does have quite a generous sweet spot. It does feel quite forgiving, and of course, being a power racket, depth and power do come easy. You'll know if you watch this channel then I don't gravitate towards these type of rackets, and that's because I feel that it abbreviates my swing a little bit. I don't feel like I'm in that kind of zone with these power rackets where I hit out and find the exact spots that I want to. And I always think that when you look at some of the pros who use power rackets, then sometimes they also have slightly abbreviated swings, and it leads to a bigger question, doesn't it? You know, chicken and egg, what came first? Did their technique adapt to the rackets that they're using, and has the rackets in some respects that they've grown up with helped to dictate their technique? Perhaps a video for another time. But what I would say is that actually this racket I felt delivered really well in terms of finding spots, and I could hit out with this racket with relatively decent control and find my spots, which is a really good thing. The other thing I was finding is that it was very similar in terms of launch angle and response to the most recent Pure Drive. If anything, I probably felt it had slightly better precision with being on a par with regards to easy depth, launch angle, and just kind of ease of play. So again, thumbs up. And then also what I was really finding is that this racket has great stability, and I thought it was superb at net. And sometimes I have slightly shoddy footwork on my forehand volleys, and that is, I think, because as a junior, when I learnt my movement patterns, I just never played any doubles. So it's a little bit alien to me, and I've only really played doubles since I've been in my late 30s and above, and I've come back to the sport. So it's a bit alien to be at the net so often and have a sort of volleying pattern that doesn't involve running into the ball. And I found that this Dunlop helped me out there. It was quite forgiving. If you got something on it, it was generally going to go back over the net. It does have a good sweet spot. I think there's something in their claims around the sweet spot being enhanced and it being more forgiving, particularly with, I guess, the dynamics of the racket giving good stability at the middle of it. And those factors combined, the obvious also transfers. It's good on returning serve. I also thought that it performed really well in the second serve drill that I like to do with one of my hitting partners, where you hit second serves and then have to follow in on those second serves and try and finish the point with a volley. Really good racket in that respect. But sadly for me, there is one massive downside. It's really stiff, and I'm not someone who really is troubled by tennis elbow or arm pain. As you know, I'm a certified PT and strength and conditioning coach and do work in that space, actually help some tennis players in that space. And this is the first racket in some time that was leaving me with a few issues with my arm. Tested it with Orange Vocal Cyclone, which I don't think is a particularly stiff string, and I ended up switching that out for Yonex Polytour Air to look for something that might help, and that did help a little. But I found myself sort of thinking, you know, in a racket like this, ideally you do want some sort of poly, in my opinion, and maybe if you go with this racket you might want to look at a hybrid setup to soften it off a little bit. And I did want to make sure, I have to say, that it was the racket that was causing these sort of slight issues with my arm. I was very mindful that when I experience some lateral epicondylitis or tennis elbow around the front of my elbow, so pressure on the bicep tendons that run down into that, then in my experience that's usually delivered from ground stroke hitting when something isn't quite right. And I was mindful that on that day it had been quite a busy day with clients. I'd also trained myself. But then unfortunately after the second serve drill I was experiencing a little bit of shoulder bursitis, which is a very rare thing for me, I have to say. And that is where you tend to get a bit of inflammation in the sac of fluid called the bursa, just in your shoulder joint, sort of in between the bones. Now, in my experience, well, that is delivered from over the head hitting and volleying. So I think there was enough evidence through the testing time for me that the racket was too stiff for me, and their dampening technology possibly isn't quite as strong as the Gore-Tex that you'll find in the Babolat Pure Drive. So where does that leave me then? I would say that this is a really good playing racket, a really solid addition to those lines of power rackets. I'm sort of seeing it at a relatively good price point next to some others, so you know, that's a positive. I think it plays really, really well. If it wasn't for that sort of stiffness issue, it would be my pick of the bunch. I have to say I'd probably go with the Pure Drive. I can't quite believe I'm saying it, but I think the Pure Drive is more comfortable, and to say that a Pure Drive is a really comfortable racket is a kind of weird thing in itself. So I think if you're someone without any arm issues and you know how to train to play tennis, then this is definitely an option that you should look at, because the playability is really, really good. But you probably should make sure you get the strings right. I'm not sure that a full bed of poly, particularly at a high tension, is something that you should consider with it. And the balance becomes, you know, do you put some sort of softer string or a hybrid setup in a power racket, and then can you play with that effectively. That is helpful. It's locked down in the UK at the moment. No tennis courts are open even outside, so no time to review rackets. Let me know which one you'd like me to focus on when I do come back to the courts in the comments. I've got the new head radicals to look at. I've also got the V13 Pro Staff to look at, so let me know if there's a preference. I'll have a think about what other content I can get out during the lockdown. But see you soon.